everyone, this is KansaiDorito, and this is the 14th episode of Girls Frontline to Explain, where we talk about the girls, their skills, and some of their backgrounds to get you caught up. Today, we're going to talk about Makiatto, aka WA2000, aka Kafka from Honkai Star Rail and Dala from Nikkei. Maki is a returning character from Girls Frontline 1, and is a goddamned professional, an absolutely lethal instrument who will always get the job done with absolute perfection. Or at least, that's what she'd like you to think. In reality, our Wawa is emotional, scared of ghosts, and painfully awkward. She tries her best to hide her emotions from the world and is absolutely god-awful at it. Because of this, she's usually the most emotional person in the room, and is easily flustered. Especially when mentioning or being around the commander, who she's absolutely head over heels in love with. But don't even insinuate it. She's a tsundere. The tsundere. Before we get into her weapon though, I saw some of those fits at the fucking GFL pop up. You know exactly what I mean. The fucking anime t-shirt and jeans that don't fit right. Take it from a guy with a degree in fashion. You can step up your drip game.
But Dorito, if I wear normal clothes, how will people know I'm a gun-wielding, robot-loving degenerate?
Boy, do I have an answer. Gachaloha. Hawaiian shirts with designs based on your favorite girls. Subtle enough to wear out, but patterns any true fan would recognize. I mean, look at that WA2000. My favorite girl is already there, and so is Maki. So go to gachaloha.com and use code Kansai to let them know your boys got shooters. Link in the description. Okay, so her weapon of choice is a WA2000, a gas-operated semi-auto bullpup sniper rifle manufactured by Walther. Unlike most sniper rifles, it's not meant for military use, but instead police and counter-terrorism units. Why? Well, in 1972, the Germans were hosting the Summer Olympics for the second time ever. The first time being under the rule of Charlie Chaplin, so they really wanted it to be a good one. To help shed their former, let's say, militaristic image, the security personnel at the event were purposefully under-equipped, having basically no armed personnel and the athletes' quarters guarded by a 6.5-foot chain link fence. Despite being aware of these security inadequacies, nothing was done. For the first couple of weeks, everything was fine, but behind the scenes, a Palestinian terrorist organization known as Black September had been plotting, and on September 5th, 1972, they made their move. At 4 a.m., a terrorist snuck into the Olympic Village, carrying Tokarevs, AKs, and hand grenades, specifically into the residency of the Israeli, Hong Kongese, and Uruguayan athletes, looking for the Israeli athletes. The terrorists would kill 2 Israelis and take another 9 hostage. Shortly after, the authorities would be made aware of the hostage situation, and the terrorists would make their demands, asking for the release of certain Israeli-held prisoners, and would throw the body of their first victim out of the front door to the building. The Israeli government would immediately respond. They would not negotiate, as was their official policy, and they would repeatedly offer to deploy the Sayeret Matkal, the cream of the crop of the IDF Special Forces. But the Germans couldn't allow that kind of foreign military intervention, and would call upon the Bavarian state police to handle the hostage situation. Now you probably understand why Palestinian terrorists holding Israeli hostages in Germany is fucking brutally sensitive, and the Olympic Committee refusing to stop the Olympics despite the crisis wasn't helping. So the Germans were under an absolutely ridiculous amount of pressure. They would choose to negotiate. They would offer unlimited ransom, but Black September didn't give a shit about money. So they would offer a trade, high-ranking German officials as hostage substitutes, but again, the terrorists refused. Not much later, the terrorists would give their ultimatum. The Israeli-held prisoners would be freed, and safe passage to an Arab country, and only then, and only there, they would free the hostages. The crisis team present would continuously negotiate for an extension of time. With this time, the Germans would deliberate on how to handle the situation. Because, believe it or not, counter-terrorist units weren't really a thing at the time. And while the Germans did have special forces, their constitution mandated that they only be used in wartime. So 13 West German police officers stepped up to the plate. With absolutely no counter-terrorist experience, shitty disguises, heavy bulletproof vests, Walther MPLs, and fucking balls of steel. They were armed, ready, and in position. However, news and camera crews were capturing the events, live streaming their footage directly to television broadcasts describing the officers' positions. This tipped off the terrorists, who then threatened to kill the hostages. The officers were forced to back down, and a new plan was devised. They would give the terrorists a vehicle large enough to take them and the hostages to 2 nearby helicopters, which would then fly to a nearby military airbase and finally take a plane to Cairo, Egypt. Or so the terrorists thought. The true plan was to set up 5 snipers around the airbase, use the lights around the base to disorient and illuminate the terrorists, and have 2 officers disguised as flight crew ambush the terrorists head-on should things go south. Free the hostages, bing bang boom. But there were some issues. Firstly, the flight crew ambush plan was thrown out. The The higher-ups saw low chance of success, high risk, and canned it. This leaves the 5 snipers, who weren't actually snipers. They were just regular West German police officers with no sniper training that were particularly good marksmen. The final issue was probably the worst though. They didn't actually have sniper rifles, or scopes. They had the G3, iron sights, and enough pressure on them to turn diamonds into dust, and by this point, no time to change the plan. The helicopter soon landed. 4 pilots, 8 terrorists, and 9 hostages were on the field. 2 terrorists held the pilots at gunpoint, and 2 of the terrorists made their ways to the plane, took a quick look inside, and realized no crew was inside. They immediately recognized the trap and bolted it straight back to the helicopters. On their way back, the 2 terrorists threatening the pilots were shot, and the 2 plane inspectors took cover behind the helicopters. For over an hour, shots rang out back and forth between the police and the terrorists, with casualties on both sides, until finally, armored personnel carriers, which was struck in traffic by the way, finally made it onto the airfield, and the terrorists knew the end of the line was near. In a desperate act, a terrorist threw a grenade at a helicopter and attempted to escape, but was gunned down by the snipers. An hour later, everything was finally under control. 5 terrorists were confirmed dead, and the remaining 3 were arrested. The plan was described as, and I quote, fortunate and successful operation, but that couldn't have been further from the truth. All the hostages were dead, and had been for a while. It was an absolute failure. The entire world realized unanimously that counter-terrorism was something that should be well-funded, and at the forefront of any safe society. Walther was more than happy to step up to the task and designed the WA-2000, a no-holds-barred sniper rifle absolutely min-maxed for accuracy in urban environments, a fine-crafted piece of equipment, legendarily good for the time. Now you're probably wondering why every police force doesn't have 100 of these. Well, these things were craftsman-made, hand-tooled, and absolutely no expense was spared during their creation, leading to a price tag of $9,000 to $12,000 per unit. So while you can't put a price on saving lives, 12 Gs for a bullpup was just too much. And the WA-2000 would see extremely limited use among police forces, mostly German. Less than 200 of these things are still around today, and are extremely sought after, with not a single one nowadays seeing anything even closely relating armed service. Basically all of them now are owned by collectors and prized for their rarity, value, and beauty more than anything else. It's a damn shame too. I'd love to see one of these used for what they were meant for. What isn't a shame is Wawa, who's absolutely valuable and beautiful as well. So let's get to her, and her skills, cons, and upgrades. So Wawa is an extremely greedy DPS, whose sole purpose is to absolutely destroy enemies and not much else. But don't let that dissuade you. She absolutely earns her place as a premier DPS, putting some of, if not the best damage currently available to us in the game. Her passive, Battlefield Insight, is a little taste of the power she wields. Firstly, it increases her crit rate by 40%, which combined with her base crit rate of 20% gives her 60% crit rate completely off the rip, but with a cost of 10% reduced crit damage, meaning a crit damage barrel is absolutely necessary to mitigate that crit damage loss. If her HP is above 80%, she gains 2 buffs: Insight, which increases the range of her ult by 1 tile, and Steady Progress, which increases her mobility by 1 tile and makes her immune to displacements. Finally, if she deals damage to a target with Frozen, a very common ice debuff, she ignores 4 points of stability and deals 20% more damage. And if they're frigid, she ignores 6 stability and increases the damage dealt by 30% instead. As far as passive effects go, every single one is super worth it to have, and lets Maki lay down fat damage basically all the time. And the stability ignore is huge because it lets Maki get around the 60% reduced damage stability brings without actually having to break enemies. In a lot of cases, enemies don't even have more than 6 stability to start with, giving Frigid some great utility outside of just immobilizing enemies. Her V3 lets her ignore even more stability, increasing the ignore on Frozen and Frigid to 6 and 10 respectively, giving you more juice, and her V5 puts the Frigid requirement aside entirely, letting you ignore 10 stability with both, and matching the damage boost at 30%. Hopefully, needless to say, ignoring 10 stability and dealing 30% more damage to enemies with the debuff both current ice supports apply by using them normally is insanely powerful, but also means you have to allow them to do their work before you send your Maki in. Her basic attack is something you will likely never use, so let's not waste any more time and move on to her first skill, Cold Precision Shot, which is the skill you're going to be using the most. At a base level, it's a 2 Confectance cost 9 range single shot that deals 1 stability damage, 160% of her attack is freeze damage, that boosts your own crit damage by 30% for free. Every time you do it, you get 1 stack of Cold Conviction, a buff that increases your attack by 10%, which stacks with your next Cold Precision Shot, stacking up to 3 times. Doing anything but Cold Precision Shot gets rid of all your stacks, but you can start the chain again when you use it again. Now, at a base level, this skill is insane, but if you've been playing for any amount of time and haven't been living under a fucking rock, you've probably heard about her first dupe, which, in my humble opinion, is the best V1 on any character, ever, and it does a fuck ton. So firstly, it deals 2 attacks instead of 1, which does give you 2 stacks of Cold Conviction in a single skill, letting you fully stack it in 2 hits instead of 3. It both changes and increases the scaling, turning a single 160% attack into 2 separate 100% attacks for a gain of 40%. Finally, it swaps its 30% crit damage increase for a different crit system entirely. If the first attack crits, the second one is guaranteed to crit, and gets a fucking 80% crit damage boost, which is fucking ridiculous. So to summarize quickly, it goes from 30% crit boosted to 160% single attack to an 80% crit boosted 200% double attack. While I'm normally not one to impose for rolling on characters, Wawa's V1 is worth your time and resources. It's only 1 copy after all, and is the main reason I made this video instead of Nemesis. I've seen far too many people miss out on this fucking dupe, and it makes me want to fucking find where they live, while they're sleeping, break in, and shove my Wawa second skill as professional tactics, and is very important to use correctly. On a 3-turn cooldown, it deals 2 stability damage. 130% of her attack is physical, gives her an AoE damage reduction buff that's stupid, and gives her 4 confectance points. Now, without dupes, this is your only way to gain confectance, so using it while you're missing 4 or more confectance to use it as little as possible is mega important for your rotations. Her V4 upgrades the AoE damage reduction, giving it a stacking potency on its AoE damage reduction, giving her more survivability she doesn't need.
But Dorito, Wawa is clearly a greedy DPS who sacrifices everything for damage. Why wouldn't some survivability be nice?
Well, first of all, die. Secondly, her ult, Absolute Mental Defense, which does 2 pretty simple things. At a base level, it gives her a shield equal to 65% of her attack, capping at 60% of her health, which basically guarantees she's never going to get one-shot no matter what, and makes her stupidly tanky for a greedy DPS. Her ult also gives her Alert for 2 turns, a buff that lets her preemptively strike attacking enemies for 90% of her attack as freeze damage, 2 stability damage, and applies Frozen for a turn, twice per turn. This not only rounds out Maki, giving her survivability, it also lets her use her incredible attack stats, absolutely smoking enemies that would otherwise have gotten their attacks off, and dealing the most amount of stability damage in her kit. For whatever reason, Mika thought it would be funny to make a DPS character unkillable for a 0-cost ultimate on a 3-turn cooldown, meaning it has 1 singular round of downtime in between uses, with its only real downside being it deals less damage than her skill 1 at V1 in a single turn. Lucky for us, Mika's got you covered there too, because her V2 is also stupid strong, increasing the cap on her shield to 80% of her max HP and giving her another intercept, meaning she gets 3 90% attacks, totaling 270% of her attack and 6 stability damage per turn for 2 turns. At V2, the second fucking dupe! If you can splurge a bit more, this is well worth the grab. Her V6 is also great, giving her 2 confectance points when she ults, up to twice per encounter, increasing the interception count by 1 again for a clean 360% of her attack and 8 stability per turn for 2 turns. Finally, it adds a new buff, Rapture, a 7.5% damage boost whenever she crits with an interception that stacks up to 4 times, adding up to a 30% damage increase at max stacks.
Forever.
This is the kind of power I hope to get out of a capstone dupe, and makes Wawa super enticing to pull on whenever she reruns, like she is right fucking now! Alright, now that we know what she does, let's move on to her nodes. Maki's nodes make up a solid roster that are all very useful. I honestly find myself on her helix page more than anyone else, swapping nodes out to fit the situation. For that reason, I'm not going to recommend any specific loadout, and I'm going to pray you have the mental capacity to decide what nodes you need for your current situation. Her first node, Additional Intelligence, refunds a confectance point when she gets a kill with Cold Precision Shot, letting her absolutely shit on mob content, opening the door to absolutely rip through 5 enemies in a row with 160% of her attack, which is absolutely insane, especially when combined with her next node, Iced with Milk Foam. This is that basic start with max confectance key a lot of girls have, but due to Maki's unique circumstances of having a 2 confectance cost skill and starting with 3 confectance, I basically always run this. It's fucking infuriating to my brain to be 1 confectance point short of another skill use, and very optimal to delay using professional tactics as much as possible, making it super optimal for basically all content. I'd really recommend running this all the time unless you really know what you're doing. Indomitable Lone Wolf is nice for non-ice teams you just throw Maki on, specifically against mob content. When she uses professional tactics, she gets 1 stack of Lone Wolf, letting her apply Frozen before she attacks once, which is nice in mob content because sometimes using Cold Precision Shot is overkill, and now you have an on-demand stability ignore you can use on an elite or tank your enemy. Time for a Break is crazy good for getting Wawa across large maps, giving her 3 additional tiles of movement on her next turn if she uses anything other than her basic attack on top of a frozen tile, which Douche and Suomi can place with ease. Icing on the cake being you can also use enemy frozen tiles to use it, since it cleanses all ice debuffs, meaning you could take great advantage of like the 2 fucking Elids that place ice tiles. Heated Caramel is incredible for bosses and elites, applying Murderous Intent to the enemy with the highest HP on the map at the start of battle. Murderous Intent being a debuff that makes an enemy immune to Frozen, but in exchange increases the frost damage they take from Wawa by 20%, increasing by another 30% if she exploits a phase weakness. Hopefully a 50% damage boost needs not be explained further, but losing out on Frozen and Frigid probably does, because this game handles immunity pretty weird. So, for the purposes of triggering Avalanche, you can still apply Frozen and Frigid, it just won't stick around. So slowing enemies will be a bit tougher if they're not already immune to Frozen. As for bosses, fucking like all of them are already immune to Frozen and Frigid, so you literally lose nothing for running this. Absolute Concentration increases Wawa's attack by 10% at the start of battle, but goes away the first time she loses any amount of health, even if you heal it back. That being said, keeping Wawa topped up should be fairly simple, since her range is long, and paired with the Suomi, you'll be able to keep this node up with no effort at all. Her capstone honestly isn't that great for Maki herself, reducing incoming stability damage by 2 once per turn if she's got above 80% health, and a 5% attack boost. This is honestly better off on your roaming DPS units like Vepli or Diane, or units that have some condition tied to their stability, like a G36 needing max stability to get the damage boost from her signature weapon, which is who I've currently got this node on to maintain basically guaranteed uptime. Awesome, now that we know how to utilize Wawa, we can look at our options for weapons. Alright, so for like the first time ever, Wawa can use any of the rifles in the game. Every single one is good. Now, some are definitely better than others, but if you're racking your brain trying to decide which rifle to give to your Wawa, you can rest easy. Just give her your best one. She'll make it work. Unfortunately, even if they're all good, there has to be a worst, and currently it's the 50 Nemesis. Again though, it's not bad. At all. It's not even weak. It's seriously on par with all the other rifles, and the difference is probably negligible when compared to any of the other SRs. But to break it down quickly, the Nemesis's trait lets you ignore 1 point of stability when attacking, doubling if she has Insight, which if you remember, Maki gets for having health above 80%, which is basically free. So the Nemesis lets you add some extra stability ignore onto what Maki already does at base, which is awesome, and its effect is also great, increasing damage by 10 to 20% to enemies above 90 to 30% health, which comes in super handy against trash mobs and bosses alike, giving you some boosted one-shot potential against trashies and a very consistent boost against bosses, especially Gunsmoke, because me and you both know if you're using an SR on Maki, you ain't killing no Gunsmoke boss, buddy. The 3-line rifle M1891, or just Mosin, is solid too, with the same trait as the Nemesis, and an effect that's literally just Phase Strike. You probably heard me and every other dipshit sing the praises of Phase Strike, so I'm not even gonna bother. Next up is the WA2000, which is funnily enough not her best weapon, but its trait gives Maki something she desperately wants, Defense Ignore, which at a base level is only 10% when attacking, but doubles to 20% if they have a freeze debuff, which Maki Ice teams have no shortage of. Unfortunately, its effect is kinda limited, increasing the damage of her out-of-turn damage only if her health is above 80%. That being said, it's still an incredible option. Finally, we have the Kovrov, or KSVK, which despite having a lower base attack, gives Wawa that same 20% defense ignore, but requires exploiting a weakness for half of it and exploiting a freeze weakness to get the full amount. Lucky for you, Suomi and Douche can both give enemies freeze weaknesses with their skills, so meeting this condition is basically guaranteed. The effect is what puts it above the WA2000, increasing all damage she deals to enemies on frost tiles by 10 to 20%, which again, if you've got Suomi or Douche on the team, is easier done than said, especially against bosses. Like the SRs, all the elite weapons are insanely good, and all of them work great. Like last time though, the Nemesis or Arcana are the worst of the best, having a 15% attack boost in the lowest base attack of the SSRs. But it's still got that solid stability ignore trait, and an effect that increases damage to isolated enemies by 15 to 30%, with the isolation requirement going from 4 tiles to 2 at max calibration, so making it extremely easy to get, and especially potent when compared to other elites, which normally start damage bonuses at 10% and cap at 20%. That being said, you're gonna feel that lower base attack, even at max calibration. Eulogistic Verse is great, and I'd consider it to be slightly better than the Arcana because of its trait, which the Verse shares with the SRK SVK, giving Maki a juicy 20% defense ignore on top of its effect, which increases damage dealt by 10% if your unit has Insight, which Maki gets for free, and increases damage by 5% if the enemy has Frozen, doubling if it's Frigid, which sounds great on paper but noticeably cripples the damage against bosses, who are usually immune to both effects, and also limits your ability to get the 50% damage boost from her Heated Caramel node. But its higher base attack and superior traits still keep it above the Arcana. The runner-up is the Samasek, which shares its trait with the Arcana, and an effect that increases all elemental or phase damage by 10%, increasing to 20% if it's electric, which Maki can't do. That being said, most of the damage you do with Maki is freeze damage. The base attack is the second best in the game, and it has a very sexy 25% crit damage boost, which is especially potent on Maki, which pushes it to be just better than the Eulogistic Verse. Her best weapon, of course, is her signature rifle, the Bittersweet Caramel, boasting the highest base attack in the game, a 25% crit damage boost, and the same awesome trait as the WA2000, which already puts it above the Samasek, even despite the kind of weird effect. So firstly, it's just a 10 to 20% freeze damage boost, which is awesome, but the second part increases the damage of her next attack by 10 to 20%, once for every 4 to 2 instances of damage dealt outside of Maki's turn, meaning that up until fucking V6 or Calibration 5, it's gonna take 2 turns of intercepts to get one singular 10% boosted attack, which fucking blows. But everything else combined makes up for it, and makes Bittersweet Caramel the best. As for attachments, you want freeze damage or phase strike, attack, attack percent, crit rate, crit damage. But don't leave home without your crit damage barrel. Alright, another video bites the dust, baby. As always, thanks so much for watching. I know this was a bit longer, and I'm sure that lore section was a bit heavier than normal, but I'm always looking to improve. That being said, if I missed something, got something wrong, or you just want to talk about the USS Midway service during the Second World War, please leave a comment. I'm still managing to read every single one of them. I recently hit my 10th millionaire goal on my Ko-fi, which is just insane. I wanted to thank all of my donators for helping fund my pulls, skins, and materials, and personally thank everyone who helped me reach my last goal. My personal and deepest gratitude to Ember, Kisaragi, Dev Null, Gabo, Full Auto Alchemist, and Salty Mate. If you want to join these incredible donators and receive a special reward on my Discord, please consider clicking the Ko-fi link in the description. Or if that's not quite your speed, you can become a channel member, leave a super thanks, or buy one of the awesome Hawaiian shirts from my sponsor, Gachaloha, who is a single guy doing all that by himself. Dude deserves any and all success that comes his way. Don't forget to use code Kansai to let him know I sent you, and get yourself a discount as well. Link in the description for that too. So, I know you've been waiting on Nemesis, and this was late epic troll or whatever, but Nemesis isn't going to be the next video either. The next video isn't going to have anything to do with GFL 2 at all. I wanted to make a series where I talk about firearms, uniforms, and characters that exist in other gacha games, try and figure out their real-world inspirations, and maybe ponder why they might wield it. This is going to be my first real attempt at branching out to other similar content, and it was your guys' comments that gave me the courage to do so, so even if it totally flops, thanks for believing in me. With all that out of the way, I can finally promise you the next GFL 2 Explained video is going to be Nemesis, with Ulrid more than likely after her. If you want to change that, leave a comment letting me know who you want to see. Alright. I know this video has gone on far too long, so I'll fuck off back to my cave. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you stay strapped.
Multiple ground targets engaging. Good strike.
Oh god. Oh fuck. She's somewhere. She's behind the wall.